Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And I'm happy to be back with everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to the program. If you want to join us by telephone, feel free. Our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to get into a bunch of things tonight. I'm happy to be back. Again, I want to give a big thanks to my homegirl, Lydia Serrani, for sitting in. I had mentioned before I went away that I had some travel plans for Christmas during that week between Christmas and New Year's, where I was going to be going to Medellin, Colombia, and in South America. But I had to change the date on those plans into January, so it kind of spilled over as a long weekend, which was part of last week. And I mentioned it. I wasn't sure if I was really clear about it. So I'll talk a little bit about that. It was a very interesting trip, for sure. Very eye-opening. But there's a few things that are on the agenda for today that I want to talk about. Plenty of news, right? The Supreme Court says, yes, we will hear the case of whether Trump had immunity. And I think this is a big deal because, well, this is a big deal, right? The potential outcome of them saying, of the court ruling saying, yeah, he had immunity as president to pursue these things, would mean that there is no more case for Jack Smith. Zero. If that, in fact, is the case. The other side of this is saying he doesn't have immunity. It just means they can continue with their prosecution or persecution, as I would say. So it's going to be interesting. I really do. I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. We'll get more into that a little bit later with one of Trump's former attorneys, Jesse Binnall. I think he's coming up in a little bit. But I want to talk about a few things. A couple of things. Some stuff is off the beaten path, and I do realize there's a lot of different news out there today. Of course, there's the Jeffrey Epstein documents. There was lots of things that are kind of been going on. 100 people killed in Iran with explosions near the grave of General Soleimani. Just a bunch of different things that are going on that I want to get to. But in particular, I want to talk about the Trump stuff. I also want to talk about the... Let me see. Hold on. Where are we going here? Sorry, I lost my place. Forgive me. Oh, yeah. I want to talk about some healthcare stuff. But really, I want to talk about a conversation I recently had. And it's a little bit off the beaten path here, but stick with me. Because I think it's an interesting snapshot of America. Right? And what I mean by that is there's always plenty to talk about. But as we look at society, I was having a discussion about society, about everything, just every aspect of life with my brother over breakfast. And because of sibling rivalry, oftentimes I'll say something like, well, this is because of, it's blue. And he'll be like, well, it's not really blue. And right away he just wants to argue with me. And, he's like, no, you're missing the point here. Right. And it's not that it's blue. It's that it's this. And he wants this color. And now it's that color. And he gets this whole big explanation to get to where I am and say, yeah, it's blue. But I understand the difference. It's the way you do the math, not how you always get to that bottom line for certain things. And this is one of those things. Right. And we were talking about how some young people don't aspire to take care of their parents when they get older. And I said, well, I could totally understand that. I don't want my kids to take care of me. And he said, why not? And I said, because it can destroy your life, right? It can destroy what you have going on when you have to take care of of somebody that's older than you when you're a young person trying to figure things out. And I only know that because I got divorced at 33 years old. I was married at 23 years old. So after 10 years of marriage, or close to it, I was divorced, and then found myself taking care of my mom, who was ailing in health and then died, and then taking care of my dad, who was ailing in health, for a decline that took about 7 years after my mom's death. And I was 7 years where I was my dad's primary caregiver. And, you know, I tried different avenues and routes. I tried to put him in a home. I tried to go every route possible, and none of them worked. He'd get kicked out of the homes. He was too rowdy. He was too tough. He was too strong. He wasn't old enough. It was this. You name it, it was a big deal, right? He was 70-something at the time, 79, 78. Anyway, bottom line here was that I agreed with my brother, who I argue with a lot, that ultimately the system is sort of rigged, right? So that you can't really die with your family anymore. Now, some people still do it, but it seems like society is collectively, perhaps, engineering a way for you to die alone. Your kids are now almost encouraged and incentivized to put you in a nursing home so they can quickly divvy up the inheritance, if there's any left. Because the new system seems to be where you work hard your whole life, you buy a piece of property for a small amount of money, and then you live in it, you pay it off, you build equity. Let's say you have a few bucks in the bank. And then what many people are doing, at least here on the East Coast for sure, they're selling this property. And they're taking that money and downsizing into a smaller condo or even an apartment. And this nest egg, a few $100,000 that they sell their house for and have profit on. They go and they take that and they use it as like a down payment to get into assisted living so that they're not a burden on their children. The problem is sometimes that money runs out before they die. And that's why a lot of these assisted living facilities include assisted living as well as more advanced care, including hospice. And they make a deal with you saying, look, this is going to be $8,000 a month. And once you're done and you don't have anything left, we'll just take whatever pension and Social Security that you have coming in as payment in full, and we'll do that until your last day. So you'll never have to worry about leaving this facility again. And a lot of people say, oh, you know what? There's security in that. That's why I'm never a burden to my kids. And they do this. And there's no problem in doing this, except for it creates a culture where your old people go off to die alone, where they're not with you. I mean, maybe you can interrupt your life and go and be with them at this facility in hospice. But I remember a time when there was home hospice where people would die in the dignity of their own homes, where, grandma would be sick in her room and she would die. And that would be it. And they died in their home with dignity, with their family. And it seemed like, to me, it seems, that those days are gone. And that idea of taking care of loved ones from the cradle to the grave is gone. And it's created these new norms that kind of devalue family. They devalue life. You sell everything you've got, and then that's it. You die and you break away from your family rather than remaining a part of your family, even though you're departed. And why am I on this soapbox? I don't know. It was just something that came up during breakfast, but I thought, you know what? That's indicative of so much of what's going on today, where there's an emphasis on, we played the audio about that dual income, no kids, DINK phenomena, where people all over Instagram and TikTok and other social media bragging about how they don't have children and they can afford to eat out, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I'm not mad at them. I worked hard to raise my kids so that I could also afford to eat out whenever I feel like it. And I understand. I just don't put down the person that did have kids, right? To each his own is what I think what we should do. But ultimately, all of this comes full circle to me in that we really are just in a place where I think we've missed the mark. We've missed the mark. And I wonder, do we get back? Is this temporary, this trend, where we've kind of shied away from family values, or not? So we'll continue that discussion throughout the evening on just the misplaced values in our society today and how culture is dictating this new normal. And I also want to talk about what's going on with the Supreme Court and what to expect in that case. So we'll get that as well as an update on what's happening with Colorado and these other silly cases where they're trying to get Trump off the ballot. Just absolute craziness. So we're going to do that straight ahead again with former Trump attorney. And, of course, your calls and more. 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The Supreme Court is going to take on that Colorado case where the state was going to remove him from the ballot, citing insurrection and the 14th Amendment. The special counsel, Jack Smith, charged Donald Trump with a number of things. Insurrection was not one of them. So given that it doesn't meet that Justice Department standard, do you think the Supreme Court will ultimately disqualify Trump?
We'll see what happens in the courts. If you look at the Select Committee's work, we made a criminal referral with respect to the part of the 14th Amendment that talks about providing aid and comfort to an insurrection. I certainly believe that Donald Trump's behavior rose to that level. I believe that he ought to be disqualified from holding office in the future. It's working its way through the courts. And in the meantime, and in any case, we have to be prepared to ensure that we can defeat him at the ballot box, which ultimately I believe we'll be able to do.
All right, so there's a lot there. I want to unpack that real quick. That is, of course, Liz Cheney. She's on one of the Sunday shows here. Let me just double check which one. Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. And she says a bunch of things here. And what I think is interesting is she says, well, in her view, right? Well, again, who are you, ma'am? Nobody really cares who you are. In the view of the Department of Justice, this was an insurrection. And that's why they didn't charge him with an insurrection, right? And even if it was their view that it was and that he was guilty of this, they didn't believe their belief enough and didn't believe that they could make this charge stick, that they didn't make the charge. They made other charges. They didn't make that charge. She says he should be disqualified from holding office and blah, 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 beat him at the ballot box, which I think we can do. Well, if you thought you could do that, then you wouldn't be going through all these legal hoops trying to interfere in the election, doing everything you can except beat him at the ballot box. Thank you very much. But that's exactly what Liz Cheney is doing. That's what the Democrats are doing. That's what every last person that's playing this game against Trump is doing. And it's backfiring on them so spectacularly. Like, I could not imagine Donald Trump having a better lead at this stage of the game, but for them doing all of this, right? He might have had a lead in some of these swing states and whatnot, maybe 5 points, maybe, something tighter, not 50 points, 30 points. But the reason he's drastically ahead, because there are fair people out there and they're looking at this and they're saying, this is an absolute fraud. This is a disgrace. What country do I even live in? Well, the Supreme Court's made a decision, and they said, you know what, we're going to, not a decision on the question. They agreed to hear the question. And I want to get into some of what that looks like with former attorney to President Trump, Jesse Binnall. He is a partner in the Binnall Law Group, and he's with us now. Jesse Binnall, welcome back, sir.
Rich, always great to be with you. I'll just correct you that unless you know something I don't know, I'm still a current attorney for President Trump.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, they wrote it the wrong way here. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I appreciate that. So let's dig into this, because I know you know a lot about what's going on, and like I said, you're an attorney for the president. You've been doing a lot of different things, and this was a question that 10 days ago had come up, and they were saying things like, we don't know, we don't think the court will take it, it's too much of a political football, but they've made this decision. Walk us through, I guess, the legal aspect of that, and and whatever political, influence may have come into that. I'm hoping that these decisions are going to be devoid of politics and really going to be based on the merits of interpreting the Constitution, but this is the world we live in.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'll say this for the Supreme Court. These justices are going to do everything they can to follow the law and apply the law to the facts of this particular case. And, the Supreme Court, especially the Roberts Court, is very much known for trying to find some kind of consensus and minimalist effort to find a more narrow ruling. And I think there's a good chance that that's what we're going to see here. But what I think is most important really to look at is the fact that there's any number of different reasons that the Supreme Court could use to just simply show that the Colorado Supreme Court was just absolutely and simply wrong here. First of all, let's just talk about the facts. And the facts here are really undisputed. On January 6th, President Trump asked people to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. He asked people to support law enforcement. When some of the protesters turned violent, he encouraged everyone to go home. These are not the words of an insurrectionalist. It is simply Orwellian fantasy that these people have, that they try to paint this as some sort of insurrection, when President Trump always had a right as president of the United States to fight voter fraud, and certainly had a First Amendment right to speak at a rally. So it's absolutely ridiculous that this has made it as far as it is gone. There's also a number of legal issues as well, such as the fact that in the 14th Amendment, they don't talk about the president. They talk about members of Congress. They talk about electors. They talk about any number of different federal government officials, but they do not talk about the president. And so it does not even apply to the president of the United States. And it's something where you would have to have Congress act. This isn't something for the courts to do. It's something for Congress to do, to act, to put in legislation that would, have some sort of ballot disqualification. Congress hasn't done that. So for any number of different reasons, I think and certainly hope that the Supreme Court is going to do the right thing here, and I think we're going to see Donald Trump on the ballot in all 50 states.
Yeah, I believe that too, and I hope it to be true. Now, help me understand. Again, my view of this is somewhat limited, and my understanding of it. But I view things from a political lens, and I look at Roberts and I think, while he has to be political in many ways because he's the Chief Justice, he's also the Chief Justice of the United States, and he can't be political. And I think as such, he tries to not be, or at least to not even be viewed as such, and will punt these types of things. And I think that's why a lot of people thought they would never take this case, or some thought. And now here we are. When you say that this might be decided narrowly, do you mean like in terms of, this many justices versus that many pro or against? Or do you mean on a very specific part of the case?
It could very well be that they do something like just simply say the 14th Amendment has what's called an enabling clause. It says Congress can pass appropriate legislation. Congress hasn't passed appropriate legislation here. This isn't a question for the courts. This is a question for Congress.
Jesse Binnall, hang on right there. I don't want to make you rush the answer. We'll come right back to you. Folks, we're on with Jesse Binnall. He's an attorney for President Trump. He's a partner with the Binnall Law Group. And we're discussing the Supreme Court, looking at the question of can Trump, can he remain? Will he be on the ballot everywhere or not? We'll talk about that and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we're discussing the question that the Supreme Court is going to be deciding whether President Trump can be kept off the 2024 presidential ballots. And this is a big deal. They have arguments scheduled for February 8th. And we'll find out exactly what's going on. And this should, of course, obviously happen before Super Tuesday. which is where the largest number of delegates are up for grabs in a single day, including Colorado, which is one of the states in question. And this is a very big deal. I'm wondering how this is going to be kind of unraveled by the courts. And to help all of us figure that out, we've got Jesse Binnall. He's an attorney for President Trump and a partner with the Binnall Law Group. Jesse Binnall, thanks for sticking with us. You were beginning to explain how this might unfold in a narrow focus, and how, one way that the court could approach this.
Yeah, and the really easy answer for this is for the court to just simply say, this is not a question for the court system. This is a question for Congress. If Congress wants to, pass appropriate legislation or otherwise act, then the courts, that's for them to do, not for the courts. So that would be one very narrow way that the court could look at it. Don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I think that would be a legally correct answer. But there's a number of other ways that they could actually go and hold, and all while reversing the Colorado Supreme Court, which is what I think the legally correct thing for them to do. Is even putting politics aside, is to reverse the Colorado Supreme Court.
Now, I've had some discussions with other attorneys, and pretty much everybody agrees that the Colorado case was, whether ranging from heavy-handed to overreaching, right? But yeah, everybody agreed this was just out of control. With that understanding, at least that's my understanding, is that one that you share? So there's, I think, a pretty good reason that so far every other court in the country that has dealt with this question has come down on the side of President Trump. The only exception to that is the Colorado Supreme Court, and this bureaucrat in Maine who's an unelected non-lawyer. But the courts that have looked at this have uniformly rejected it. Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And to me, it's incredibly important that the rest of them do, right?
Yeah.
No,
that's right. And that's now, realistically, with the Supreme Court weighing in, I think this is probably going to settle the question, because I think they really had to take this case, because at the end of the day, the 14th Amendment can't mean one thing in Colorado and something else in Idaho, right?
Right.
And so once you get that split in authority from various jurisdictions, that's when the Supreme Court is most likely to weigh in.
And I think it's funny, but when you look at these cases like this, it makes the most sense, where I look at this and I go, this is a good thing for Trump, right? Because whether you have 35 states or whatever, 49 states all saying one thing and one saying something else, or two saying something else, ultimately, when they do that, it kind of forces the hands of the Roberts Court to say, well, we didn't want to say anything, but now we kind of have to, because it's out there. And like you said, this can't be one thing one place and another, especially when they're talking about a federal statutory thing, a constitutional matter that isn't a statewide matter. And that was always a question that I had. So as they figure out what's going on with Colorado and they do that, do you expect that the fitness for office, obviously arguments to be kind of tossed aside everywhere else, because they're all based on this 14th Amendment, as far as I know? Is there any other argument besides that you've heard?
No, there's nothing else that I've heard. And I think at the end of the day, they are going to have to face reality. The other side's going to have to face reality here sooner rather than later, that their strategy of trying to stop Donald Trump through these left-wing prosecutors and judges and bureaucrats is not going to work. And in fact, I think they're really galvanizing the American people. It's the problem with so many bureaucrats, is they don't understand the American people. They don't understand that the surest way to get the attention of the American people is tell them they can't do something. So try to go tell the American people that they cannot vote for Donald Trump. it's going to make them want to vote for him even more. And I think that's exactly what's happening. And as you pointed out, that's why his poll numbers are outstanding right now. Not the least of which is because of all the insanity in the Biden administration, and the American people badly want Donald Trump back in office.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Now, if if this were medicine and we had come up with a diagnosis, what do you think the differential diagnosis to this would be if they decide not to go that route and say, look, and bounce it back to Congress and say, look, this is not our thing. This is not a question for the court. This is something where they've got to come up with legislation for this. What would another route that you could potentially see the court taking be?
Oh my gosh, there's any number of different things that they could do. The Roberts courts likes to, for instance, be very, very narrow in the way that they view who has standing to bring constitutional questions. So they could look at standing theoretically. I don't think that's going to come into issue here, but that's just by way of example of something that could be looked at. They could look at like I said, I think one of the clearest examples here is that the 14th Amendment does not mention the president and the vice president of the United States. And it's not like the people who wrote the 14th Amendment didn't know that there was a president of the United States. This was written, after, I think during the Grant administration, after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by a couple of years. So they certainly were aware that there was a president of the United States, and they decided not to put the president of the United States in that section. That right there is dispositive. So they could just include that. They could have a little bit of a hodgepodge if they wanted to, and include a number of these arguments. Or they could keep it very simple and just go with one and try to get as big a consensus on just that one argument.
Do you think that they might actually deconstruct the argument itself in terms of the office of the presidency not being an office under the United States, or not being an officer in so much as he is the president? Or would that be too far into the woods?
No, I think that's something that is, very ripe for consideration because, if you go look historically what an officer under the United States is, or an officer of the United States, those are the people that are appointed by the president, not the president and not the vice president. And also not members of Congress. And so we know that they do mention representatives, they mention senators, they mention, presidential electors, and they mention officers as well. And so because of any number of different legal and historical purposes, we know that the president doesn't fit in any of those categories. The only thing left to determine is that they purposely left the president out. And under any number of different canons of statutory construction, that's exactly what you're supposed to do in this case.
Folks, we're on with Jesse Binnall, one of President Trump's attorneys, and he's a partner with the Binnall Law Group, discussing how the Supreme Court might weigh in on this question. Jesse Binnall, before we wrap, and it's been great analysis from you. You're right. Obviously, this is, I'm trying to handicap this race, but, you being an attorney know that difficult to handicap the Supreme Court for sure. And,
yes.
Who knows, especially Chief Justice like Roberts, who is allergic to doing this.
Yes.
It seems like,
absolutely.
other Chief Justices kind of rose to the occasion to say, oh, this is a tough one. We got this. He's the exact opposite, in my opinion. But all that being said, the big day is February 8th. Do you expect that to be one of many, many dates, or is that, do you think, an open and shut, all right, here's what we got, and here's where we're going with it?
I think it's going to be open and shut. I think, while not predicting what the Supreme Court's going to do, I think that's a fool's errand. We can pontificate about possible options, but one thing that I'll say is I think that they will give a definitive ruling based on the argument that they're going to have on February 8th.
Yeah. I tend to, my gut tells me that you're probably right. The easiest way for the court to do this is to say, oh, we're going to hear it because we're going to hear it, but this is on Congress, not on us. and change the Constitution, you know, something like that. Don't come to me. And I could totally see them taking that route. Jesse Binnall, let everybody listening know how they can get a hold of you and follow the work that you're doing.
Yeah, Rich. Well, I mean, it's our website is binnall.com, and they can follow me on social, including X and Truth Social and Instagram, all at @jbinnall. That's at JBINNALL.
Outstanding. And we'll include a link to his social media handles when we retweet this broadcast so that everybody could listen to this interview and get a little bit of Jesse Binnall's insight. Jesse Binnall, keep up the great work, sir. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Godspeed. Folks, we continue our conversations on society at large. What's going on with grandma, grandpa, mom, and dad? Are we going to send them off to die somewhere else or not? I don't know. We'll continue that conversation. We'll continue this conversation as well as to, you guys can help me handicap this. Will Trump get tossed off the ballot? Does he stay on the ballot? How does the Supreme Court end up weighing in on this? I'm open to hearing what you have to say about it. Looking forward to it, actually. The phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's me, Rich Valdez, back with you. We're live. It's Monday night, and I'm happy to be back with you. Again, I'd taken some time off because I had some plans to travel during the holidays, and I wasn't able to get away and had to kind of change those plans a little bit, and they didn't solidify until after the new year. So I was off a couple of days. I know I had gotten a couple of notes from people saying, hey, you all right? Are you whatever? I actually did lose my voice. So if I sounded a little rough last time, or even now, I think I'm a little hoarse still. But it was because of all the fun I was having. I went to Medellin, Colombia, in South America. What a good time. And what an exciting trip. It really was. Not the type of vacation where you are relaxing. There's no relaxing going on here. There is so much to do. It is so steeped with culture. And I didn't really know the geography of it, but it's surrounded by mountains and tons of valleys and just so many beautiful neighborhoods and just quite phenomenal natural landscape that's just really mind-blowing, really is. Hadn't seen anything like that before. And it was really awe-inspiring. So I will share a little bit about that. But it's beautiful, and many people could see how beautiful Colombia and many places are. But what was interesting here was that in addition to all the natural resources, I should say the natural beauty that they have in Colombia, every time I got in an Uber or a taxi, I would meet with, I would chat with one of the drivers, and more than half of them were exiles or refugees, I should say, from Venezuela, because communism had destroyed their country. And the election of a very new left-wing progressive communist sympathizer named Petro, who is the current president of Colombia, was top of mind for a lot of these guys, the Uber drivers, that were saying things like, we've already seen what communism can do in our country and what it did to our country and how it ruined it. And they were saying, lamentably, it's inevitable what will eventually happen to Colombia now because of those same policies that we saw in Venezuela. And he says it's just a matter of time on how quickly the progressives can become more collectivist and ultimately embrace more of this communism and or these communist ideas. And it was a really interesting conversation with so many of them. Mind-blowing, really was. I was like, wow, to think of how many people now live in Colombia that are Venezuelans and want the best for their country, but just don't have any opportunity in Venezuela. So they go and they work and they hustle and they try to make ends meet in Colombia. And another thing that was very eye-opening is sexual tourism, right? There's in Medellin, apparently a lot of people go there just because it's like Vegas in many ways. It's like Sin City, prostitution is illegal. That may be the thing, a thing in a lot of places. But what was interesting here was there seemed to me to be, when you would go in some of these commercial districts, some of these women that propositioned themselves on the streets weren't women. And I don't mean that they were men. That they had that too. But they were children. And again, I have a daughter that's 18, another one that's 22. These girls looked younger than my youngest daughter. They looked to me 12, 13, 14, in that range. And it was like, wow. And I saw one and I thought, oh my gosh. I saw two and I was like, oh, what's going on? And I saw a good, half dozen or so, ultimately, like throughout the days I was there. And I thought to myself, man, that's a real thing. These are, and then I don't know their story. I don't know if they were being held against their will and being trafficked, but it certainly didn't look that way. It looked like they were, one of them actually looked like she was with her mother, and her mother was her like security / pimp, if you will. All of it ultimately was just very eye-opening. And it made me realize there are a lot of issues that we need to address and be aware of. And I don't know if that's at the top of the list or the bottom, but I do know it was quite a sight. And it fascinated me nonetheless. And I think that they're going to see continued growth in Medellin. And I'm hopeful that we don't see that type of tourism grow in other places, because it doesn't seem like it's the best thing for anybody, including those young ladies. Anyway, more to come straight ahead. We're going to wrap this up in a moment, and then we're going to move on to our next topic. But stick with me. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we're going to get into some conversation on a few different things that I want to get into. There was a bill called the SAFE Act that was passed by the legislature in Ohio to protect minors from getting surgeries that would irreversibly harm them. Governor DeWine made a veto of this and took some donations from hospitals that would be financially impacted if the bill was enacted. And it looks like it's funny business. So we're going to talk about that and a couple other things. I want to talk more about my Colombia trip when we come back. So stick with us, folks. Hour number 2 is coming up. Rich Valdez back with you live. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Happy Monday. Welcome to the program. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337-833-4-Valdez. And there's plenty to discuss. We're going to double down on what I mentioned right before we took our top of the hour pause. And that is what is going on in Ohio with this legislation that was designed to protect kids from being harmed permanently by whimsical decisions, right? Decisions that are made on a whim, whether it be for a mastectomy, for any other type of permanent surgery that would harm one's genitals. And it was kind of just brushed off as, no, we're not doing that. We're going to veto this. Why is that happening? Well, some are saying that the governor in Ohio had accepted campaign donations from an organization that would support this being vetoed because they stand to benefit from doing such surgeries. And I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but we're going to get to the bottom of it as we go through what's going on in this particular case. And I got to tell you, it's not good, right? I mean, you can make arguments for or against just about anything and make them seem somewhat plausible. But in a situation like this where you're talking about the welfare of children, to me, it just seems like it's just a little too much. It's over the top. So I want to get to the bottom of this with somebody who knows exactly what's going on. He's the chairman of an organization called Do No Harm, their website, donoharmmedicine.org. And again, if you're just tuning in, Governor Mike DeWine from Ohio recently vetoed something called the SAFE Act. Now, this was a bill that was passed by the Ohio legislature aimed to protect minors from irreversible harm. Now, the governor, DeWine, accepted campaign donations exceeding $40,000 from the same Ohio hospitals that would have been impacted financially had this bill been enacted. And this is important I think it's important to recognize that the one Ohio hospital actively lobbied Republican Governor Mike DeWine to veto a ban on transgender procedures for minors. And this is a big deal. So let's get to the bottom of this with the chairman of Do No Harm, Dr. Stanley Goldfarb. Doc, welcome.
Wow, great to be with you, Rich.
Thank you. Likewise, and Happy New Year to you. So I know that you guys recently, you've been at the forefront of this, right? I know that I saw that you had made this very compelling argument earlier in the month with respect to this. There was a lawsuit that was brought by Vituity and their processes, and now you're back with going after the governor for doing this, for this crazy veto. And I'm glad that, when these issues arise, that you're taking action because I think it's necessary. But give us some of the background for those who may not be aware of your group, what you do, and why you decided to take action on these issues.
Sure. Well, I was a physician for many years at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and our organization began in April of 2022 with the specific goal of fighting against so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion in healthcare, which turns out to be a real discriminatory activity, and one in which the plan was to treat people differently based on their skin color in an attempt to overcome a real problem, which are healthcare disparities. They ended up blaming it on bias on the part of physicians. And our big concern about that was that focusing on that was not going to improve anyone's healthcare. And in fact, it was going to produce more distrust between patients and physicians. And in addition, we were very concerned about this problem that you spoke about, the problem of so-called gender-affirming care for young people, for children. We take no stand about adults who end up being transgender. This is about children.
Right.
And the concern we had there was that children just are really two things. One is they are unable to make any sort of informed decision about going on medications and surgical procedures that would irreversibly change their lives, render them sterile, render them unable to participate in any sexual activities in any normal fashion. And the other problem was that in looking at the literature very carefully and mimicking what's gone on in a number of European countries, it's quite clear that these procedures actually don't help children. There's more harm than good. And that's why 5 European countries now, England, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, have all decided that they're going to severely curtail this activity and not expose children to drugs such as puberty blockers that prevent them from going through puberty and hormones that will change their sexual characteristics, giving testosterone in large doses to girls or estrogens in large doses to boys that would change their gender. The problem is that it's been identified that the vast majority of these children actually have severe underlying psychological problems that have led them to seek this kind of, salvation for their problems as opposed to trying to get at the underlying problems, which are often depression. Many of these children are autistic. Many of them are depressed. They may have anorexia. They may have been abused and so on. So our organization was interested because we just want everyone to be treated in healthcare as an individual. We don't want children to be assumed to be part of the transgender ideology and movement. Rather, we want them treated as individuals with intense psychological treatment before anybody even considered doing anything like putting them on medications or even giving them surgical procedures, which will alter their lives irrevocably. So we began in April of 2022, and the way we've tried to attack this issue is both to inform the public, which we've tried very hard, but also to help sponsor legislation, and that gets us to Ohio, right? So now it turns out there are now 22 states that our organization has been able to help sponsor legislation that would severely restrict, in many cases ban, the use of these drugs, which block the children from going through puberty, or hormones, which would alter their secondary sex characteristics, and certainly surgeries in anyone who's under 18. We have no position on those over 18 or adults, but on under 18,
right.
We've worked in 22 states to ban this procedure. And Ohio was one of those states. Now, the way it works, as it does in Congress, first the legislature has to pass a bill, and then it has to be signed by the executive. In the case of Ohio, through working very closely with the legislature in Ohio, the bill was passed which would ban these procedures in children until they were 18, would ban the use of the drugs, would certainly ban the surgical procedures. And the governor had the choice of he could have signed the bill, he could have vetoed the bill, which he did, or he could have left the bill alone, in which case it would have passed automatically. But he chose to veto it. Now, I wouldn't be quite willing to suggest that the motives that he had were anything other than him trying to do what he thought was the right thing. He certainly has received these donations from this hospital system. I have no idea whether that influenced his decision at all. But, this is a very difficult problem. The stress that the governor was under is a number of parents are under the belief that this is the right thing for their children. Now, I certainly think parents should be, completely involved in the health care of their children, but unfortunately, the parents have been told things that just aren't true. They've been told that if they don't support their children who suggest they want to go through this gender transition, that the children are going to commit suicide. And this turns out just not to be true. These children do have underlying psychological problems, but there's nothing about this particular disorder where they feel, it's called gender dysphoria, where they feel uncomfortable in their bodies, that's going to give them a higher risk of suicide. They're depressed. They may have ideas about suicide, but the frequency of suicide is no greater in those children than in other children with similar sort of psychological problems, but don't have this gender problem. So the parents are told you can either have a live daughter or a dead son or vice versa. And it's quite understandable that parents would want to, do something that they think is benefiting their children. It's not. It really isn't. But the governor hears parents tell him that, you've got to support my child. You've got to support children in this. And he ultimately made this decision. Again, whether the donations had anything to do with it or not, I don't know. The governor made a great mistake here, though, because this is not benefiting children. That's what the European nations that I mentioned before have shown. And that's what if you really look carefully at the studies that have been conducted, they really don't demonstrate that this is beneficial. And despite what your audience may hear, and people that are involved in this activity, other physicians, and even professional organizations say this is the right thing for children, but in fact, it's just not so. And it's going to turn out to be a tremendous, medical problem in the future when it's appreciated that, in fact, this is something that doesn't benefit these children. And many children, we now know, will go through something called detransition, where they'll actually change their mind and show that there's a problem. So that's the problem in Ohio. The governor decided to block this. Again, it was a mistake. And I think, in fact, there's a good possibility that the legislature, which has a supermajority in Ohio, may go ahead and pass this law anyhow. And it will become law, and Ohio will join the 22 other states that have decided that this is not what children should undergo, that if children want to undergo gender transformation, which is basically represents sort of a delusion that they can take on a different body and that's really going to change their lives, that they have to wait until they're adults. When they're adults and they want to go down this path, that's up to them. But our country supports that. But again, if they were in these multiple European countries that are very liberal countries that have been performing these procedures for many, many years, these countries as a group have decided that, in fact, looking at the literature, looking at the studies, and looking at their clinical experience, that this is not the right thing for any child.
Folks, we're on with Dr. Stanley Goldfarb, chairman of Do Not Harm. DoNotHarmMedicine.org is their organization. They've been very outspoken in protecting children. And I want to continue on this thread with Dr. Goldfarb straight ahead. Of course, if you have a question, you'd like to join this conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Amigos, we continue our conversation with Dr. Stanley Goldfarb. He's chairman of Do Not Harm. Check out their website, DoNotHarmMedicine.org. And they've been very vocal in standing up for children to not be subjected to genital mutilation and any other type of abusive practice of putting a kid in a position that they can't come back from. And when there's an underlying healthcare issue, mental health care issue. And I think that's remarkable because a lot of doctors have kind of succumbed to the pressure of those that embrace this type of ideology, and they just feel like they've got to do what they've got to do, right? And they go with the flow. And I think it takes a courage to honor the Hippocratic Oath, to say, do no harm. And that's what donoharmmedicine.org is all about. Dr. Goldfarb, how did you end up as chairman here? How did you put this organization together? How did you end up in this situation?
My career was in academic medicine. I had been a professor at Penn's Medical School for many years, and I was associate dean of curriculum. And I just saw that where the direction that medicine was going. I wrote a book after some articles in the Wall Street Journal that got me some notoriety. It got me canceled, actually. I wrote a book called "Take 2 Aspirins and Call Me by My Pronouns," and it was all about my concerns about where healthcare was going. It wasn't about the gender issues that we've been discussing, but it was about the whole issue of discriminatory practices in healthcare and sort of the death of meritocracy in healthcare, and deciding who should become a physician and who should become promoted within medical schools and do medical research in that whole area. So I've been active in those areas, and I decided after writing the book that I needed to act on it. We needed to do things, and we started the organization, and we've been lucky to be able to be quite successful over the last year and a half with many articles in media, including Wall Street Journal, New York Post, and then we've launched a number of legal challenges against organizations that had engaged in discriminatory practices. I think you mentioned one about Vituity. Vituity is a company that provides doctors to work in places where there's a shortage of physicians. They have doctors on staff that they send to various locations and supply the physicians. And they had a program where they were giving a $100,000 bonus, but only to black physicians who would sign up. And in America, we don't do things that way. We don't do things based on race, or at least we shouldn't do things based on race. We should do things based on merit, and it might be that a black doctor is the right doctor for a particular position because
like Ben
he's
Carson.
talented or she's talented, exactly. But it shouldn't be based on their race, on their skin color. It should be based on who's capable and who's the best person for the patients and the best physician for the patients. And so we sued them, and they decided to take down their activity and to offer it and to not to have this bonus in play. So
Doc,
we've done a number of activities
I hate to interrupt you, but the music means they're kicking both of us out of here. Let everybody know how they can follow you on social media if you're on there.
It's Do No Harm Medicine.org, and our Twitter is at Do No Harm Medicine.
Excellent. Dr. Stanley Goldfarb, Do No Harm, outstanding. We'll be right back.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks. So in addition to Lloyd Austin being out and the Marine Corps commandant being out and nobody knowing who's really filling in, it's alarming. And it gives so much ammunition to the conspiracy crowd that loves to think that, somebody's secretly running the government. Listen, I'm the first one to agree that someone's secretly running the government. I just don't think it's somebody that's on my side. I think it's somebody that's, some Biden crony or some Obama lackey or Obama himself, that are calling the shots here. But be that as it may, there's an interesting story that's come out. And this story, very interesting. Fox Business. Initial U.S. employment report, so the jobs report, overstated jobs by almost 440,000, so just shy of 500,000 for 2023. And we've talked about this because they always kind of go back and adjust their numbers after they put out the jobs report. But it makes you think, like just in anything. You know, if your boss gave you a task and said, hey, look, you got to sell cars. All right, I'm selling cars. How many cars did you sell this month? Well, I sold 100 cars. Wow, great job, Rich. Well, thank you, sir. And then next month I go, well, I didn't really sell 100 cars. I sold 20 cars. I had to adjust for 80. I mean, it seems like that is the norm. And it's shocking to me that, you know, we see one story about it and nobody else is really talking about that stuff. But I think it's hugely important. I mean, if you're saying one thing and it's really another, that's a problem. That's not an overstatement, although maybe it is. Maybe that's what folks in that business consider it. But, you know, can you do overstatements of 439,000 in your work, in your life? No, I don't think any of us can. I mean, you could, but people will think you're full of crap. You lose credibility. Anyway, I want to get to the bottom of that with one of our friends here on the program, E.J. Antoni. And E.J. Antoni's the research fellow. He's a public finance economist at the Grover M. Herman Center for the Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation. E.J. Antoni, welcome back, sir.
Rich, thank you for having me again. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And I know we've touched on this other times that you've been on, but I'd not seen a report that kind of put them together cumulatively like this, where, you know, it's not every month everybody going back saying, oh, by the way, we kind of screwed this up. This is the actual number after you come out and make big noise about the fake number. But here we are with a pretty big discrepancy, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my bias speaking. Is this a big deal, this jobs report being overstated by 439,000 jobs in 2023?
No, it certainly is. And, you know, for some context here, Rich, every single month so far for 2023, they were all revised down with the exception of July. That's it. Every other month was overstated. It's extremely unusual to have, you know, all the errors essentially going in one way over such a long period of time. It points to something really wrong, you know, with that methodology at the BLS. And once you include not only the monthly revisions, but then the annual revision, which they call the benchmark, that you essentially revise away about a quarter of all the jobs we initially thought we created in 2023. I mean, I'd say that's pretty significant.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it also kind of indicates where, you know, I've had some people that I like on this program, Ben Stein, others, who were, you know, adamant that, you know, we have a very solid jobs. The jobs portion of our economy is very solid. And a number of people have said that and said, look, we're probably not going to be headed towards recession because we have such a hot jobs market. And I'm thinking, you know, how much of that is no longer true given this new information?
Well, Rich, the other thing is you need to be willing to go beyond the headlines, I think, to really get an honest feel for how the labor market is doing. And, you know, one classic way you do that is just look at multiple job holders. That's anyone who holds more than one job. So, you know, if you're like most Americans right now, where you're holding a second or even a third job, you get counted in that category. That's very important because every time you go out and you get another job, you're counted as an additional payroll. That's the monthly number we get, non-farm payrolls. So even though you haven't increased the total number of Americans employed, you continue to see those jobs numbers going up. So because we have a record number of Americans right now holding a second or a third job, we also have a record number of Americans holding multiple full-time jobs, so people working 80 hours a week or more. You know, all of that is causing those jobs numbers to go up much more than would normally happen with a labor market that's as unhealthy as this one is right now.
And I think that's a very interesting point. because without that, I think it puts the overall picture in a very dangerous place, an alarming place, because we want to have obviously a strong economy, but when you find out that this isn't really the case, it's not. And I also think that when you have a lot of people with second jobs, most people I know don't have two full-time jobs, or they have a full-time job and a part-time job, something on the weekend, something that they don't do as much. And that would mean that if there's a lot of people holding more than one job, that it would also mean a lot of these jobs are likely part-time.
Exactly. And Rich, that's such a great point, because if you look at the full-time versus part-time numbers for 2023, what we find is that the full-time jobs numbers were flat for the year. So we basically didn't add any full-time jobs in 2023. Instead, we added millions of part-time jobs. So, just look at just in the month of December alone, the economy wiped out all of the gains from full-time jobs from the previous 11 months. We lost 1.5 million full-time jobs in a single month. So all the job gains we had were all part-time. And again, a lot of them were people who were simply taking on that second job that you were just describing.
So when I hear President Joe Biden, who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden, when I hear him whisper and say, Bidenomics is working, how do you reconcile that? How is Bidenomics working if it's really not?
Well, it is working. It's working to impoverish the American people and enrich the donor class. Most Americans are really struggling because their wages have not kept up with the increase in prices that we've seen over the last 3 years. But if you're an upper income earner, your income has actually, on average, risen faster than inflation the last 3 years. You also tend to own more wealth. You also tend to have more wealth, I should say, whether that's owning equities or owning real estate, whatever the case may be. You're talking about assets which tend to rise very quickly in inflation. In other words, their prices will inflate along with all the other prices you see throughout the economy. So if you happen to be lucky enough to be a member of the donor class, the political establishment, you know what? You've actually done just fine, and Bidenomics has worked for you pretty well. But if you're the average American, Bidenomics has worked for you not so well, which is why the vast majority of people in this country disapprove so strongly of this president's handling of the economy.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. I want to continue our discussion on the economy with E.J. Antoni. He's fantastic at it. He's from the Heritage Foundation, and he's with us. If you want to ask a question or join this conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, familia. Welcome back, amigos. We're on with E.J. Antoni. He is a research fellow with the Heritage Foundation, and he's one of the best economists in the business. That's why I try to bring him on as often as I can to get the scoop. And a lot of what we're talking about transcends into other things, right? People's bottom lines, how they live their lives, and what's happening. And he's got a really very, very interesting piece on, who's leaving where. And when you look at Census Bureau data, it shows that New York is hemorrhaging what matters most, right? People at an alarming rate. Today, I look at another piece. Let me see where this is. This is a New Jersey blog that says that New Jersey's also in amongst the top states where people are leaving the state. And again, New Jersey is a stone's throw from New York, so that makes a ton of sense. And, I look at these states and I think, what do they have in common? Bad ideas. They've got some very bad ideas coming out of their governors. So I want to get into that, into this piece, The State Escape, with E.J. Antoni. What was the impetus for this one? Because, obviously, it's important to keep, your finger on the pulse of what's going on. But I would, on any day of the week, any year, you tell me, what states do you think are, leading the way with people jumping ship and leaving these states? I'm always going to go with probably the most populated states run by Democrats, and I'll probably be close to being right. But what was the thought process here, E.J. Antoni?
Well, Rich, that's a great observation. You have these very large Democrat-run states, and that is where people want to leave. But in terms of this particular piece, I had done a study back in 2021, early in 2021, looking at the latest round of tax increases by the state of New York. And, if you're a New York City resident, not only do you have the high state taxes, but now you have the high city taxes as well. You throw federal taxes on top of it, and you're looking at top marginal income tax rates well over 50%. You're actually looking at about 60%. And so for a lot of wealthy people, they're just going to wash their hands of that and say, you know what, enough is enough. And they end up leaving. And so we put together some estimates basically of just how many people would leave. And it came in, the census data came in very, very close to what we had projected. And so, in seeing that, I thought it was just a really good idea to raise the alarm once more for people. Look, actions have consequences. And, if you raise taxes enough on people, they will say enough is enough, and they will leave. It's exactly what we've seen. And it's not just true in places like New York with high taxes. You see the exact opposite in places like Tennessee, like Texas, like Florida, that have low taxes. And you even see it in places, I point out in the piece, Wyoming, because some people have made the argument now that, New York is just losing people to states like Florida or Texas because of the warmer weather, right? People are retiring, whatever the case may be. And I point out, you know what? Wyoming has worse winters than even New York, except New York is losing people to Wyoming as well. Why is that? Maybe it's because in Wyoming, you will literally pay half the taxes that you do in New York.
That's remarkable. It's remarkable. And ultimately, people don't want to lose their money. So they're going to make the move.
Exactly. And it's funny how you will often hear people on the left talk about things like fairness as an excuse, right? They use these amorphous terms that sound nice.
Pay your fair
fairness. Share. Right. Yeah. That's their excuse for taking people's money. Please explain to me how it is fair for you to take what you haven't earned, but it's not fair for me to want to keep what I have earned. It just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, no. Well, somebody has to pay for their addiction to spending, and in New York, with this massive migration, the bill doesn't end. It's a very sad situation. Now, based on the study that you did, because I think this is pretty interesting, and I've thought about moving to Florida for a long time. The handful of states that have no income tax seem to be just getting everybody from all over the place, not just New York. How long do you think that trend continues?
I think it's going to continue as long as the high tax states like New York continue with their policies. And, it's actually not even just the low income tax states. Property taxes are a real killer for a lot of people. That's one of the reasons why when you look at not just the absolute numbers, but the rates, in other words, the percent of population change, Texas is actually starting to lag behind a lot of other states like Florida, even like Tennessee, because the property taxes in Texas have just gotten completely out of control. And so that ends up actually in the long run being even more of a population killer than income taxes do. So, here's hoping the Lone Star State really gets their act together and gets those property taxes down.
Yeah. Now, E.J. Antoni, we look at this. It's usually the same usual suspects, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, South Dakota. Do you expect anybody to jump on this trend? I know that Idaho seems to be seeing some growth, probably more than usual. People leaving, seeking refuge from California. Do you see any other states kind of stepping up to lead in that area?
It's funny you bring up Idaho. On percentage terms, I'm pretty sure they're seeing the biggest inflows from other states. So, I mean, they are growing like gangbusters. Utah is another one right by Idaho. Utah is also doing very well. Both of the Carolinas have been picking up steam lately, and Arizona has as well. So, again, the winning formula really seems to be, number one, low taxes overall, lower property taxes especially. No income tax is a huge help. And, even if you have to have a relatively high level of sales taxes like they do in Tennessee, the highest sales taxes in the nation, you can still get by on that, provided you aren't taxing your people to death in all the other different types of taxes, right? You go to states like Illinois, like California, like New York, you can't find any taxes that are low. They're just all high.
Unreal. E.J. Antoni, stick with us. I want to wrap up with you and get some insight from this other piece you've got about hurting, but not for a lack of money. Folks, stick with us. We're coming right back with economist E.J. Antoni.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation with E.J. Antoni, research fellow of public finance. He's an economist with the Grover M. Herman Center for the Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation. And he does have a piece that I'm going to encourage you to take a look at. It's called America's Hurting, but It's Not for a Lack of Money. And you could find that one, America's Hurting, but Not for a Lack of Money, on the heritage.org website, which is heritage.org. And I definitely recommend you check it out and follow him. Now, E.J. Antoni, again, I want you to remind everybody how they can follow you so that they can, see these pieces as you're writing them and putting them out.
The best place to find me is going to be on X. The handle there is @RealEJAntoni. I repost all the articles I write. I also do different commentaries on there, and I include all of the data analyses that I do every single day, reading through these reports so you guys don't have to.
Yeah, and I really, again, I want to encourage you. While he has his serious professorial doctor economist hat on with us many times, he's got a really good sense of humor, and you're missing out if you're not following him on social media. E.J. Antoni, thank you, sir, for being with us.
My pleasure, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, there is more to come straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. Hour number 2 is coming up straight ahead. It's Open Phone America. I'm Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. This is the hour of the program that we call Open Phone America, It's a time-honored tradition here on the program. This started way back when I was born, back in 1978, when Larry King was the host of this program, and dubbed it Open Phone America, Open Phones Across America, where you get to call in and comment on what we've been discussing this evening, or just bring an entirely new topic to the table and discuss it. And that was a tradition continued by the late, great Jim Bohannon for 3 decades on this program. And, of course, it's one that you and I are going to continue this evening. So thanks for joining the show. If you want to get in on the action, give us a call, 833-482-5337. If you want to be part of the program, 833-4-VALDES is the phone number. And, of course, you could follow on social at Rich Valdez with an S at the end. And I spent the weekend in Medellin, Colombia, South America. What a beautiful place. And I mentioned a little bit earlier that one of the things that was really an eyesore for me was that there's massive prostitution there, massive. But the big issue is that some of these women weren't women, and they weren't men either. They were little girls. And they looked like little girls wearing dresses and makeup and heels and wearing tattoos, but they weren't older. They were still little girls that appeared to me to be 14, 13, 12. I mean, really young looking. And, maybe they just looked young. I mean, I was at one restaurant and the waitress looked like she was, whatever. And my kid is told oftentimes that she looks like she's 12 and she's 22. So I think that there's something to be said something to be said for people that appear younger than they are, good genes or whatever and what have you. But when you see that number of them, half a dozen or so like I did over, different days, I realized, wow, this was just not cool, right? This is, this appears to be a problem, and it's a thing. And I know it's a thing in other parts of the world, and now it's a thing there. And while I was there, part of the reason I went, actually, was to get a tattoo. There's a tattoo that I wanted to get of a microphone combined with, like, the Statue of Liberty. Not like the Statue of Liberty on the microphone, but, kind of juxtaposed next to one another. And the tattoo artist was explaining to me that he says, this is like Vegas in many ways. He's like, it's Sin City here in South America. And it made a lot of sense. I understood what he was saying. But it just made me realize, man, are we going in the right direction or the wrong direction? And are people more open to human trafficking, to what the progressive left likes to call sex work, and doesn't call prostitution anymore? Is it become so normalized that it's just a thing, and I'm the only old fogey that's being taken aback? I don't know. I'd love to get your take on that in general, plus everything else we're talking about. 833-4-VALDES is the phone number. But I also want to get your thoughts on so many things that have been occurring, right? We have the January 6th, which, of course, for January 6th for me has always been a very solemn day, not because of what happened back in January 6th of 2021, but because January 6th is the 12th day of Christmas, Epiphany, Little Christmas. And that 12th day of Christmas is known in Spanish as Three Kings Day, El Día de los Reyes Magos. And that's a big deal, right? As a kid, I always, not always, but I oftentimes got a gift on that day. And my dad would always tell me the story about how that's when he got all his gifts. They didn't get them on Christmas Day. If anything, Christmas Day was the first day of Christmas, and it was kind of a countdown, and it really got good towards the end. So is where they got their gifts. So I just I thought it was really nice to be out in Colombia and celebrating January 6th historically and culturally, right? But of course, there's also January 6th, the famous riot at the Capitol, and lots that surrounds that. So if you want to weigh in on that, you can. Of course, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about what is happening with Lloyd Austin and the Marine Corps Commandant and others that look like they're in charge but are not because they're on sick leave. So we're going to get to all of that and more, plus your calls. Let's see. Where do we go here? I want to go to Gil. Gil is calling from Manila, Philippines. Gil, go right ahead.
Feliz año.
Feliz año nuevo, sir. How are you?
Bien, gracias. I just wanted to mention that January 7th would have been Jim Bohannon's 80th birthday. And
wow.
As you know, he and I went way back. We were in the Army 1966. I was 5 years younger than he was when I went in, but we went in at the same time and served the same 4-year hitch of active duty. And
you're fading out there, Gil. But yes, January 7th, 1944 is when Jimbo was born, James Everett Bohannon. And sadly, we always celebrate Jimbo here. But yes, his birthday would have been January 7th. I was out of town still. But I'm so happy that you knew that and remembered that and called in for that, because we should be celebrating those things and always, take a moment to acknowledge and honor what would have been Jim's birthday. So thank you for always being so thoughtful and for being, I would call you the resident historian, but that's our buddy Bill in Missouri who gets that title. You are our regular caller, Gil, who is a real friend of the program, and I'm always grateful for that. Now, do you guys celebrate Three Kings Day, or as we call it in Puerto Rico, El Día de los Reyes Magos, or do you have some other January 6th holiday?
Well, 87% of the population here is Catholic.
Yeah.
So the liturgical year means an awful lot. I have a good friend who's a Jesuit priest, and he reminded me that January 8th this year is a special holiday in the church in regard to the Virgin Mary. So I've been very blessed with the wonderful people I've met here who've been so great. And one other thing, you had mentioned before that the only joke you ever laughed at was the one told about Henry.
Gil, I'm sorry, brother. You're cutting in and out. Let's see if we can get him on a better line, because I want to hear what Gil has to say. But I was getting every third word. Hopefully the audience was able to hear better than I was, but I couldn't hear it. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. We've got calls in Alabama, North Carolina, and more coming up. Get in line if you'd like. 866-505-4626. That's the Jimbo Legacy line. 866-50-JIMBO, as you know it. Or you can call the regular phone number any day you want. 833-4-VALDEZ. Either way, we're coming right back to your calls and a little bit more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 5337 833 4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. I think we have reestablished connection with Gilberto. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, well, you had mentioned that the only joke I told that you ever really laughed at was the one about Henry Kissinger. And back on my summer vacation, when I spent 241 days in a Mexican prison, I had a new joke every day to kind of entertain my compatriots there. There were about 1,500 inmates in the Quink.
Wow.
And, well, we had some interesting people. We had a Jeffrey Dahmer, and yeah, we did. He cut up his neighbors and made them into tamales, and that was his nickname. They called him Tamales. But anyhow, because I had a Jeffrey Dahmer joke, it worked real well with other inmates. And it went something like this, Jeffrey Dahmer, the cannibal, had his mother over for Sunday dinner, and they were just chatting, and his mother said, Jeffrey, I really don't like your neighbors. And he answered, that's okay, Ma, just eat the vegetables. So
there's some dark humor there, but that was actually funny. That made me laugh. I got it. And it's not that your jokes aren't funny. It's that I have ADHD, and I lose it before you get to the punchline. That's not your fault. It's mine. Gil, excellent joke. I appreciate it. And I love it when you give a call and makes us chuckle. Godspeed to you. Happy New Year. Talk to you soon. Let us continue with our calls across America. Let's go to Ron, Cullman, Alabama, WBCF. Ron, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead. Welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Rich, for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
One of the few programs that's worth listening to, I guarantee you. And I very much enjoy it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you, man. I wanted to speak on about our January 5th and 6th of 2021. And I like for Congress, this is one thing that they can do. I mean, one thing is get these people out of these prisons. And because they have the right to a speedy trial, a fair and speedy trial.
Right, the Sixth Amendment, sure.
And to be able to look at the evidence and to show, because I watched the whole thing the whole day. I was watching what happened there at the Capitol outside, watching the D.C. police bring in a convoy of the Black Lives Matters just in the cars. And when they got out, they had the backs, the whole thing, man. I watched every bit of it, and I even watched some of the tapes afterwards. But I had the pleasure of watching on the 5th of the rehearsal that they had with the Black Lives Matters and FBI inside with Pelosi's daughter filming it.
Right. She was making a documentary on that.
Yes, sir. And so these things, it was set up because they had been doing it for months. I've been bedridden since '92. That's all I do is study and watch what's going on with my country, and of course try to find a good radio station to listen to. But now for during Obama. Robert Biden went to 29 countries, 411 times trips in Air Force Two, and the different businesses had secret.
Robert Biden is Hunter, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's his first name. Hunter's the middle name.
Well, yes, sir. Well, he's been dodging subpoenas for 10 years, man. That's the way, they can continue doing that to doomsday. But this is something they can do is get these people out. They're committing suicide. They're away from their families. They're spending all the money that they have, plus more, on these lawyers that drop them after a while. And I heard just a couple of days ago one man that he just gave up. He said that he's lost his marriage. He's not been able to see his child that was newborn. He'd never even seen the child. And it's on a station that you know, I'm not going to mention the news station, but unless you want me to. But
no, that's all right. Just get to the point of it.
Well, the point is that this man, he's all but gave up. You know that they've committed suicide in there, and some of them have committed suicide after they've gotten out, after signing that paper that they make them sign. And these are Americans. They have the right to quick and speedy trial, and to see this evidence, Rick. And we got to get these people out, man.
Yeah. And, of course, just for the audience's sake, you're talking about Matthew Perna, who had taken a plea deal and eventually felt like when he was recharged with a higher offense, said, you know, this is for the birds. I'm never going to make it, lost heart, and took his own life. And that's very sad. It's very, very sad. It's very unfortunate that somebody would be in a position like that. And I've seen interviews with his aunt and her sharing that she was heartbroken. And honestly, it's a heartbreaking thing to hear. This young man, younger than me for sure, would go ahead and get so drastic because he felt like there was no way out. There was no opportunity for him to be okay. And that's just got to be soul crushing, really, you know, to think, especially if you're part of it, that you somehow, you know, were responsible in part for that. And it's just very, very unfortunate. Ron, I want to thank you for your call. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Godspeed to you. Happy New Year. And, folks, I'm looking forward to the rest of your calls. I see we've got calls from North Carolina, from Indiana, and more that are rolling in as we speak. I'll also take a look at some of the social media in case there's some comments on there. I know I don't do that as often as I should. But either way, I just want to remind you can always check out the website, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com, to check out any of the interviews that you may have missed. Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. And don't go anywhere, folks. We're coming right back. The rest of your calls and more. The second half of Open Phone America is coming up right now. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you worked so hard in the industry, and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And earlier, we were discussing what's going on with Donaldus Magnus. Is he going to be kept off the ballot? And over the weekend, various people, Liz Cheney, Jamie Raskin, and others, were all over the late-night shows discussing their thoughts on who gets to run for president. And it was interesting to see the usual suspects come out and say, no, we don't think this is going to be good. Pelosi says that there's a view of the Constitution that Trump should not be able to run for president. It's a view that's not shared by the majority of courts in this country, but one court held on to it, and now that's going to the Supreme Court. Listen to Nancy Pelosi.
So, Madam Speaker, if you believe he engaged in insurrection under the plain meaning of the 14th Amendment, you believe he's ineligible to be president?
those laws, those are up to the states. They have different laws from state to state. I don't think he should ever have been president. It's the Constitution. But nonetheless, there is a view of the Constitution in Article 14, Section 3, that he should not be able to run for president. But that's not the point. The point now is that, again, different states have different laws. We don't think in California that it applied in our state. That's what the decision was made here. But anyway, not to go into that because that's very intricate. What is very clear is that the American people want us to honor our oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Now, this is fascinating. What's very clear, different states have different interpretations. Even Stephanopoulos yells, "It's the Constitution." Now, George Stephanopoulos worked for Bill Clinton. This guy is a Democrat operative turned journalist. He's never liked Trump a day in his life. But even he says, he interjects emphatically. She says, I'm reading the transcript. Those laws, those are up to the states. What? The 14th Amendment is up to the states? No. They have different laws from state to state. Sure, there may be different laws, but they don't have a 14th Amendment because that doesn't belong from state to state. Every state has the same 14th Amendment. I don't think he should ever have been president. There's another one. I don't think he should ever have been president. So, because you thought he shouldn't have been president, now we're going to have turned the court into contortionists? Stephanopoulos yells, "It's the Constitution." I mean, I think this is a remarkable conversation. And then Pelosi goes on to say, but nonetheless, there's a view of the Constitution in Article 14, Section 3, that he should not be able to run for president. But that's not the point. Then what is the point, ma'am? She says, the point now is, again, different states have different views. So hold on a second. Does that mean that the Constitution changes by what state I'm in? Wow. That is a very wide open view of the Constitution. That's not even a view. That's just a rereading and rewriting of it, in my humble opinion. And then she says, what's very clear is that the American people want us to honor our oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. I agree with that. I think there's people looking at her saying, let me get one of those ugly, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, let me get one of these ugly ways of describing what Nancy Pelosi is doing and saying. And it's absolutely out of control. Absolutely out of control. When she says, we don't think in California that it applied in our state. Ma'am, no state gets to determine the U.S. Constitution. In fact, there's just one court that determines that, and it's the Supreme Court. And they're actually about to do it. I can't believe that this woman was Speaker of the House. Because I used to think that she was so sinister and that she understood this stuff backwards and forward. And that she was really good at this. Not good, in my opinion, like doing the right thing, but good at being a crooked politician. But either now she's past her prime, or she's been winging it all along. Because how could you make such a statement? Unbelievable. Really, that one is, I'm going to go with disappointing, but not surprising. But you know what? I am surprised. I didn't think Pelosi was that not swift, that silly. Anyway, lots more to discuss on that topic. Let's go to Matt near Morehead City, North Carolina. If I remember it right, Matt, you're 80 miles north of Morehead City. What's up, my man? Happy New Year.
Correct, Rich. You're very sharp on the memory part. That's a straight line, 80 miles north. But anyway, roughly. Happy New Year, first of all.
Yeah.
I got interrupted by Kilp in the Philippines has the most amazing stories. He's one of your greatest scores I've ever heard. Being prison with Jeffrey Dahmer is unbelievable. Number one.
Yeah,
You
that was great.
You heard that. I was in shock. But anyway, before I get to my main point, we got a really bad storm coming here. Up
I've heard.
Near hurricane force winds. You probably heard about it. My main point is this. I'll make everything short for your show. Have you heard a speech from so-called President Joe Biden earlier in the week attacking President Trump, threat to democracy? Well, if Joe Biden was worth being president, he'd know we have a constitutional republic, not a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And what most impressive, Rich, is my real president, Donald Trump, had a perfect response. No personal attack. If you heard it, nope. I'll tell all your listeners, all millions of them. His response was perfect. No personal attack, just what he did, and he ran out of gas before the end of a short speech of attacking Trump, and Trump came back with, folks, what I just said. He ran out of gas before the end of a short speech attacking me. And, well, folks, I didn't do any of those things. Like, he's like, this, folks, this is not who we need for our president.
Right. Well, I agree with you. I think that, we're in bad shape. I think most Americans agree with you. I think you got Democrats that are like wringing their hands, shaking their head, going, come on. Is this really the guy? Is this really the person that is going to try and do this? A guy that tries to claim that Republicans are Nazis and he's still chanting about January 6th out there. And I mean, come on, enough is enough. But this is where we are today, right? This is what he believes is the way to go. And it's a shame, but this is where we are. And he's out there, right? Biden's been out there. He was at a church today in Emmanuel Church in Charleston. And he says, look, we're taking on housing discrimination in many, many ways, right? This is Biden saying that we're taking on housing discrimination. And listen, if that's the issue, then great. But, the way he just talks about things so flippantly, the white guy's home is valued more than the black guy's home. You know it and I know it. And it's just so matter of fact, right? His delivery of his rhetoric. And it's sad. But, Matt, listen to this.
We're taking on housing discrimination in many ways. So a home owned by a black family on one side of a highway, built by the same builder on the other side of the highway, and a white guy living in it, the white guy's home is valued more than the black guy's. No, I know you know it, but guess what? That's how you build generational wealth when you build your home.
Now, listen, I'm not mad at Biden for wanting anybody to build generational wealth. That's what I want for everybody. That's how you do make it in life. But the idea that every last black person's home is being undersold because they're in a certain neighborhood, I can't subscribe to that because I've just seen it to be different, right? The market is maybe not always the most fair thing, but it has a sense, right? Whether it's up or down, it goes up or down based on the same types of things. And you can't, at least I've never seen this to be true. I've never seen where you're like, oh, look, I'm in a neighborhood where houses are, $650K, let's just say. And that one's $655. That one's $632. That one's $647. Everything's more or less, 10, 15 grand in a range. And they go, that's a black family. That one, you can get that one for $200,000. I've just never seen this happen. I just haven't seen it happen. And if that's on me, I was at lunch with my lawyer friend not too long ago, and she insisted that this was an ongoing problem in America. It's just not one that I see, honestly. I have not seen outright rampant discrimination against against people by race in a housing situation. If I'm wrong, give me a call and tell me, Rich, I love your show, but you're ignorant as heck on this, and let me tell you how it went, or here's what I saw. And we can have that discussion. But as of right now, I don't see that being a problem anymore. I don't see redlining being an issue today like it was once in our country. So I think we've got to take it how it comes, and I think Joe Biden's full of it on this one. What do you think?
I think Joe Biden is totally what Donald Trump said, but he handled it very well. He has no business being our president.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. Matt, thanks for the call. Big shout out to Morehead City, North Carolina, WTKF. Going to get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. I want to continue our conversation with some of our friends across America. Let's go to Bedford, Indiana, WBIW, and check in with Sarah. Sarah, you're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey.
Welcome.
Oh, great to hear from you. Great show as always. Just wanted to say that, concerning January 6th, it was really an act of civil disobedience. And, our forefathers dumped tea in harbor. That was pretty illegal. Civil rights movement, they broke laws that were on the books in the South to protest. I mean, people.
Well, that's an insurrection then, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, labor movement, early years of labor movement, they broke a lot of laws. What they're trying to do is they're trying to give these harsh penalties to scare people from rebelling because they're getting ready to put the clincher on with the tyranny. I mean, everybody knows that there's one set of rules for liberals and another for conservatives, and they're denying us our constitutional rights to vote and elect candidates, and they're making no bones about that they're going to not let us vote our way for change or use peaceful legal means. So what do you call that? A tyranny, and people have a duty to rebel against tyranny. So I think people should look at this in like the context of the Soviet Union and other tyrannies and realize that we're going to be in for a nasty fight, and don't lose heart, but they're not going to give us a peaceful way out of this. They're not going to say, oh, okay, well, you followed the law and we'll give you your rights. They made it very clear that they're interested only in taking our rights away.
Yeah. Well, listen, I agree that there is an erosion of liberty occurring as we watch, right? We're seeing it happen. However, I would disagree with you in that I think it'll be very peaceful, honestly. I don't believe we're ever going to be in a position to have a revolution again. And that's just my belief. Hopefully I'm wrong, honestly. I hope that I'm wrong. But I believe that the left is the left, no matter where they are, right? I'm not talking about the American left. I'm talking about the left in general. And the way that the left works is typically focused on fooling people into thinking that they're doing the right thing, right? It's the Khmer Rouge, right? Pol Pot and his dictatorship, Fidel Castro, his revolution. These were all very straightforward. We're here to tell you what to do. You will do it. And if you don't, we will call the rest of our communist buddies, and we're going to take you out. And I don't mean to dinner. However, that isn't how they operate now. They haven't operated like that in many, many years. Their whole idea is to get you to want to do it and to try and upsell it in a certain way where they're like, well, if you do it this way and this time, you can get this. And if you do it right now, well, then maybe I can help you and blah, blah, blah. And you create all these incentives that are not based off of anything that is, I'm going to say, heavy-handed, right? It's just these series of suggestions to get you to do what they want you to do. And ultimately, people end up doing it. And it's like, giving people enough rope to hang themselves and then going, yeah, just jump over the edge. And people do it, sadly, Sarah. And I think that's how they get what they get. I hope that we're both wrong in that doesn't actually happen. People wise up and stop ceding their power to the tyranny-minded folks in our government. Anyway, Sarah, I'd love to get your response to that, but I have to take a quick pause here. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, with minutes to go, let's go to Cleveland, Ohio, WEOL, and check in with Steve. Go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, easy listening, Rich. How you doing tonight?
My man. Happy New Year, Steve.
Happy New Year to you, Rich. Hey, I guess a question I can come up with, January 6th, was it really a real thing, or why did the liberals go out and get a movie producer and there was only 140?
Which one of these was fake, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and where was the 10 or 20,000 National Guard that Trump wanted, and Pelosi said no, and something in there? If Trump would have said something different, it would have been an insurrection or the 14th Amendment. Or is Biden really president? Is Biden running everything? Or the borders open? Or do we have borders? Because there was some Trudeau and Mexico and Biden, he signed something about treaties and all that and whatever. And there's so much, never been so much in our lives going on. So I call it CDC.
You call it what?
Right. CDC. Confuse, divide, and conquer.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. And, that's I did a show years ago, not that many years ago, but like 4 years ago maybe, on how this divide and conquer came about as a use by the Bolsheviks. And let me tell you, fascinating the way they use misdirection and the way they try to really divide people to conquer them. It's a well-thought-out plan. So, Steve, I think you're on to something, and maybe we'll do a deep dive into that as well. Steve, thanks for the call. I appreciate it, folks. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, I am Rich Valdez. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America.